All right. So we're going to start then. So as we said last week, or as I said last week, we wanted to have a conversation with you discussing your fear of snakes and seeing if we can get over that fear. But I'm also more curious about where that fear came from and a bunch of other questions that I have. So, but the first thing is we can't hold Winston today. And that was the original plan. But now that he's gone into shed, I think he would actually, you could hold him in shed, but I don't want to risk it. And I don't like holding snakes in shed. Do you know why?
Because they will attack you.
Well, one of the things that happens when snakes are in shed is they go blind because their eyes fill with a fluid so they can't see. So if there's any point in time where Winston's going to be aggressive, it's during shed. Even though I've never seen him aggressive during a shed, it would not be unfair to you for you to have your first snake hold inside a shed. So we're going to actually hold Winston once he's shed. So later this week, we'll do that. Today will just be the conversation around the fear, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so the first thing I always ask everybody that I have on the podcast is I'm always curious about how they got into animals and where the passion came from. But because you aren't into animals, I'm curious about your childhood and animals. Did you ever have any obsession with animals as a kid, or did you have any interest in them whatsoever?
When my sister and I were younger, we had a small obsession with those fish. What are they called? They're colorful and
like
they
betta
go.
Fish?
Yeah, those. So we got a few of those, but they die really quickly. And after that, hamsters. We had a few hamsters, but I got bored of them really quickly.
So other than that, you guys had never any pets. But then in terms of like your actual interest, would you watch a nature show if it was on TV?
I think we watched that like Zaboomafoo or something.
Oh yeah, Zaboomafoo was great.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think that's a Canadian show, or actually maybe it's an American show. I don't know, but I know I used to watch Zaboomafoo, which I loved, and that's a great show.
Yeah, I did have an obsession with monkeys at one point. I think I was in grade 5.
So, but that never translated into any interest of wanting to keep a pet.
I wanted to keep a monkey.
Oh yeah. Well, every kid wants to keep a monkey. But other than that, you never had an interest in having a pet. Because when you guys first got your dog, which you were probably 22.
Yeah.
It was like disturbing to you.
I didn't want a dog.
Yeah. So, which is pretty unusual. At least for the people that I interview on the podcast, everybody's so obsessed with animals, and you're kind of the opposite of that.
Yeah, I just was always kind of afraid of dogs.
And then in terms of reptiles, and we can call, I guess, reptiles and snakes, did you always have a fear?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Why?
Spiders were really scary. Actually, when I was younger...
Spiders are not reptiles, but...
When I was younger and it would rain and then all the worms would come out the next day, I remember being like kind of fascinated and also kind of grossed out by all the worms. I don't know. Is a worm a reptile?
See, this is what I'm dealing with, guys. This is the animal. She has a deep respect for the fact that I have a respect for them, but she really has no clue. And as we know that, like, most fear comes from having a lack of knowledge, which I think we'll expose in this conversation. So no, worms are not reptiles. And I have a feeling that you've identified anything that is scary as a reptile in your brain. But was there a moment where you decided that you would be afraid of reptiles? Or maybe it seems like you don't even have a good definition of what a reptile is.
Well, no, I don't have a good definition of what a reptile is, but I think when I was growing up, we grew up in the city, and so there's no like bugs in your house, really. I mean, there'd be like centipedes in the basement, which would be so disgusting.
You keep coming back to bugs.
Oh, so maybe I'm just afraid of bugs.
But anyway, keep going.
Oh yes, my mom is terrified of like bugs, so
right.
And reptiles.
But did you ever have an encounter with a reptile or a snake? Snakes are reptiles, by the way, but I'm just going to count.
I don't think so.
So as a child, you never had like a garter snake or found a garter snake?
Just at the zoo.
But I think the main point is you actually have very little knowledge of them. So it's more of like an unknown.
Yeah.
And so upon meeting me, we met in 2012, and at that time, none of this existed except for Jackson.
Jax.
He was the only the only reptile that was in the family. And what did you think when you met me and we started dating? You must have known already that I had Jackson because I'm sure I talked about it. Jackson's a crested gecko for those of you that don't know. And what did you think of the crested gecko?
I thought it was really weird. I'll be honest. I thought it was a bit weird. And I thought he was really creepy.
At first.
I'm glad, like, I like that you didn't like take him out and like play with him. I think that would have been a little bit weirder for me if you did that. But I guess I didn't realize that you had the reptiles more or that you had Jax not so much as like a pet, but as like, you were more obsessed with like building the enclosure as opposed to, playing with a pet. Like you would play with a dog or something.
Yeah, of course, some people keep reptiles that way, and that's totally fine, but that's just not my style. As the listeners know, I'm always the animal is like the cherry on top, but creating the enclosures, creating the environment, and being able to look at them is like the main point. I love keeping animals for that reason. And so I guess you slowly warmed up to him because there was a long time where I just had Jackson because I didn't get Ruby, my day gecko, until 2015. So there was 3 years where I had no reptiles except for Jackson. And then slowly during that time, you just found him. I think you just slowly got more interested in him.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Now he's my favorite one. So.
You love Jackson, but you've never hit a point where you're actually interested in reptiles. You're fascinated by them, but it's not like you go out of your way to research them or want one.
No, I would never do that.
So,
well, maybe not never, but to this day,
yeah, because there's a lot of nevers that you've changed in the whole reptile hobby since then.
That's true.
So you slowly became more fascinated with Jackson, and then I got Ruby, and when I got Ruby, you seemed like you were actually excited about that.
Yeah, I thought she was pretty.
Yeah, because we went to the expo and you liked going to the expo.
Yeah, I was afraid of the expo, but I thought it was cool.
And then a year after that, so we met in 2012. Ruby came the day gecko in 2015. Then 2015 as well. Later that year, I got my first snake, Winston, who we're gonna hold later. And Winston is a boa, and if you want to see a video, you can see that the video before this. So so for the story of me buying Winston, I told everybody that I'm getting him. I even had a tub set up, and nobody believed that I would actually do it. But I was super fascinated, even though I hadn't been into snakes at all. For whatever reason, when I was researching day geckos, I started researching snakes, and that made me become obsessed with boas. And that's when I was like, I want a boa really bad. And so I set the tub up. Nobody believed me. And then I went and got the boa without telling anybody. And I remember coming home and I have this pillowcase with the snake in it. And my mom was like, "What's in there?" I'm like, "Nothing."
Is that how she sounded? What's in there?
Yeah, she wasn't quite like that. She's like, "What's in there?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "There better not be a snake in there." So anyway, it was kind of like that was the environment of bringing it home. And everybody obviously loves Winston now, but everybody at the beginning was really afraid. And you were pretty, would you say mad? Because he was also in our room.
Yeah, I think I was more afraid that the snake would get out and then you just like hear all these horror stories. And I thought that every single one of them would happen to me.
Yeah. And when I got Winston, he was 67 grams and probably not even 2 feet long, really, really small snake. Now, to be fair, this entire conversation is about you holding the snake for the first time. And you actually did hold Winston within a couple of weeks of me getting him. But he was really tiny, really small.
So small.
And ever since then, you've never even tried it. Now he's a lot bigger. He's 5 feet long and much stronger. So you kind of missed your opportunity to grow up with him. I think you maybe held him for like 10 seconds and that was it.
Yeah, about that.
And, but slowly over time, your acceptance, because I've obviously brought home 3 additional snakes since Winston. And each snake that I brought home, you seemed more okay with.
Yeah. I mean, if you brought home 5 more, I wouldn't, whatever.
And now, how would you describe your fear of them?
I don't know if I'm not afraid of them being in their cages. Like I can go up and like watch them when they're out of their hides. And I'm not afraid because I know there's like a glass protecting me. But I'm still afraid of them when you take them out.
Yeah. So anytime I take them out, you're pretty apprehensive. You kind of back away.
Yeah. Well, I'm less disgusted by them. Like I used to be very disgusted by them.
Why?
I thought that they would be slimy. And
yeah, everyone says that.
But yeah, like the thought of a snake would make me feel sick. But now I'm like, I think they're cool. Like I think that they're interesting, and I like watching them like eat and.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting because you were like really, really afraid, and you still are afraid of them. But especially with the glass between, you're able to appreciate how actually fascinating they are.
Yeah, and when you got bigger enclosures for them, it was cool to see, like, you know, the tubs was, you know, you don't really get to see them because it's opaque. But now that there's glass and they can like spread out, it looks cool.
Yeah, you're like a sales pitch for the theme of my podcast. But yeah, so you slowly become more fascinated with them. You do come in here and you'll watch them.
Oh, yeah.
Even on your own sometimes without me.
Yeah.
And you will touch them if I bring them out.
Yeah.
Like if I put them on the carpet, you'll actually pet their back.
Yeah, I don't like their heads though.
But she has yet to actually pick one up and grab it. And even touching it, you're pretty scared.
Yeah.
And we should the slime thing is because everybody who's afraid of snakes says they're slimy.
Oh my
Maybe
gosh, it's so false. They don't feel slimy at all.
What do they feel like?
I don't know. Like they feel kind of velvety. Sometimes they're like cold. Sometimes they're warm. I don't know. You don't like. I always thought like scales grosses me out so bad.
Yeah, Sam has that. What do you call that? There's a fear of little holes.
Oh.
I can't even say it. For those of you, there's a term for it. It's a phobia of like very small holes clustered together, and even like me saying this is freaking her out. And scales are sort of in that class, which even adds another level of fear to the snake or reptile. But anyway, keep going on. They're not slimy.
Yeah, they're not slimy, and you don't feel the scales like you would imagine that you might.
Mm-hmm. Especially on the boas. There are some snakes where you might feel the scales, but for these guys, it's pretty smooth.
Yeah, no, they're soft.
Yeah, so the fear has transitioned to a little bit more fascination, but you have yet to actually pick one up. So what is the fear of holding it?
My biggest fear, well, obviously I'm afraid that they're going to strike at me and hurt me. But like I'm not so much afraid of that as I am of that happening and then I drop the snake and I hurt it.
Yeah. So you're worried about not only getting hurt, but also hurting the snake as a reaction.
Yeah, like how bad would that be? That'd be really bad.
If you killed one of the snakes?
Yeah. I would feel horrible.
Yeah. Well, luckily they're very tough and you're not going to, you'd have to do something pretty extreme to kill them. I'm not saying like we're going to manhandle them or anything, but in terms of, so being bit is a fear.
Yeah.
And I've talked to you about reading their body language and you've seen when I feed them how crazy they act. So anyone who doesn't have snakes, there is a palpable difference between a snake that is just exploring their enclosure and a snake that smells food. Now, if you've never touched or heard of been interacted with a snake at all, maybe you as a person who doesn't really know much about snakes, can you describe the difference between a snake that's not doing anything and a snake that knows there's food coming?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this will be right or not. But when the snake is just normal and it's not having one of those feeding responses, it will just be like looking around. But they always say like if the snake goes in an S, that's when you should be afraid. But that body language is even different, like when they're not wanting to eat versus when they're wanting to eat. Like sometimes your snakes will look like they're in that S, but they're not wanting to strike at anything. Yeah, the S is just like the shape of the neck when they sort of recoil the head back. I just want to describe, because some people might be watching this who are not even part of the reptile community. Most people are, but anyway, that's when the snake recoils their neck a little bit and their top of their body sort of in an S shape, which is the position they would be in before they elicit a strike. Yeah. But when they want to eat, oh my gosh, you can tell they're scary. Like their eyes are black. Like actually black. I think that pupils are just dilated, but their eyes are black and they, like, you can tell. Yes, there is a huge. Mean. They do look. There is a very big difference in body language, and she's talking about the eyes going black. One of my boas, because her
I guess, iris is a light color. It's very easy to see her pupil. So when she smells food, it's really incredible how much her pupils dilate. They dilate almost to the maximum point of her iris, and her eyes do look black, and they are aggressive, and you can see their movements are much quicker. Their heads are tracking everything, especially the boas seem to be very visual. So as soon as they smell that rat, it really changes them completely. Mm-hmm. But unless there's that scent of the rat, like you could never make one of these snakes act like that without the scent of a rat. It would be impossible. I don't even know how you do it.
That's true.
So what's that?
Is it true? I don't know.
Well, we'll find out. No, maybe if you were really antagonizing them, of course, any animal is going to fight back if you're antagonizing it. So that's how the relationship you want to have with an animal when you're holding it is, because they're not looking forward to being held necessarily, because they are a wild animal in some sense, and it's what I've said before, having a giant primate pick you up is worst case scenario for a snake in a lot of ways. But these animals are used to it. They've been sort of habituated to that. So, but anyway, reading their body language is a huge part of understanding the animal. So watching how slowly they're moving, watching their tongue flicks. When tongue flicks are very slow, you can tell they're relaxed, they're exploring. You can look for any it's pretty easy to look at an animal that's afraid and read their body language, because, it might coil up, it might be trying to get away. Like you've seen me take the carpet python out when he gets a little bit crazy and he wants to get away from me. It's pretty extreme. Winston is super relaxed. Every time we take him out, he's just on tour. Mm-hmm. So that is a big piece of it too, is just learning how to read the language of the snake's body language.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So in your best case scenario, how would we go about you holding him? Like, what's a scenario that we would run through to make it so you would be comfortable in the end actually picking him up?
I would say it has to be in stages, like slow exposure.
Yeah.
Progressive exposure.
So how do we do that?
I think first we just take the snake out and just, I don't know.
Do you think we should do it in the living room where there's lots of space on the floor? We don't want to do it in here. There's so much stuff.
Definitely close to the floor, so that if I panic and I feel like I need to drop it, the fall is like a couple inches.
Right.
I think it would be helpful if you would just like control the snake's head a bit.
Yeah. The head is always a fear.
Yeah. Because I don't want to be holding it so much that he starts to get antsy and doesn't want to be held anymore, because then he'll start, trying to run away.
Well, and the thing with him is he doesn't really get like that. That's why we're going to use him, because out of all the snakes that I have, he's so relaxed. He's happy to do whatever. Mm-hmm. But maybe we start with him just crawling on the floor and letting him come to you.
Oh, God.
And then slowly maybe he crawls over your leg or something like that. We start with that.
I'm really afraid of its head.
Yeah.
His head.
Because you're afraid that it'll bite you?
I don't know.
Everybody's afraid to get bit by a snake. Unless you've been working with snakes for many years and you've taken lots of snake bites, it doesn't matter who you are. It's like a primal instinct to recoil when a serpent tries to bite you.
Yeah.
Like even me, I've never been bit by a snake, so I can't tell you not to be afraid of it. I can't tell you that from what I've heard, it doesn't hurt. But that's how much trust I have in these animals, is they've never bitten me. And I've pulled them out in shed. I've done all these different things. So with him, it'll be more relaxed. He's on tour. He's not. The only time he would bite is two things. One, he's feeding, and you would just discuss the response for feeding really has to be associated with the smell of the rat. And two, if he's afraid. So as long as we are not doing anything that makes him feel like he's in danger, then he will not bite.
Okay.
And yeah, do you have any other questions about it?
I don't think so.
All right. We are going to go hold the snake. We'll come back in a week, which is going to be an instant for you guys, and we'll see if she can do it. Fingers crossed.